Hey, everybody. This is Jonathan Noble, Pennsylvania, divorce and family law attorney. I'm delighted to have on my inaugural live stream the one and only Judy Tseng, North Carolina divorce and family law attorney extraordinaire. Judy, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Judy Tseng. I'm a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, and I'm licensed in North Carolina. I practiced briefly in Virginia and was licensed there until I finally decided I'm going to be in North Carolina for the rest of my legal career and my life, most likely. So I finally gave up my Virginia bar license a couple of years ago. And I've been in solo practice for the last 16 years. I worked for several small law firms around DC and Raleigh and Durham before I finally made that big jump and became a solo practitioner, which I love. It is like the most freeing thing ever, is to be your own boss. And in addition to practicing family law, I also do general civil litigation and employment law cases, but I really do enjoy the family law cases, especially mediating and doing collaborative divorce too.
Right. It's my understanding that you're certified by the North Carolina courts as a court mediator in divorce. Why don't
Yes.
you just tell us a little bit about that and how that process works?
Sure. Well, it's been quite a while. I can't believe it's been about 10 years since I first got certified to be a superior court as well as a family financial mediator. But you basically have to go through this 40-hour training course. And it's not just attorneys that are eligible to become certified mediators here. There were some people who worked in HR or law enforcement who also wanted to become certified mediators. And so you can still apply to be on the court appointed list to mediate cases, even if you're not a licensed attorney. But of course, the vast majority of attorneys prefer to have licensed attorneys with that kind of experience to mediate their cases. So
Sure.
it is pretty tough to break into the market and become a mediator. So that's why I would say mediating probably only takes up about 5% of my practice.
Okay. Well, one of the purposes of me starting to do live streams is I get hundreds of questions on my own YouTube channel from the videos that I make. And I thought it was about high time that we can dispel some of the myths and some of the rumors and some of the urban legends, if you will, about what goes on between divorce lawyers and give you guys and gals a roadmap. Maybe you can make better decisions before you get married. And we're going to talk about things that are kind of like white elephants in the room that people don't like to talk about. There's a lot of people that go into marriage with this Disney-esque mindset where they think they're going to live happily ever after. And Judy and myself have seen some of the worst things you can imagine. And we're going to talk about some of those things. We're going to talk about how to avoid them, how to protect yourself, and some of the things that people don't even think about when they get married. So, anything you want to add before I move this conversation forward?
Oh, those are so many topics. We could be talking for days about it. So, depending on how much you want to talk about. I mean, I have so many stories as you have. I've been in practice for 22 years and you've been in practice even longer than I have, I think. So, yeah, so we're here willing to spill the tea to a certain extent. I mean, even though we do have to protect confidentiality too.
Right, right, of course. So, and if you have any questions, leave them in the live chat or the comments. We'll do our best to try to get to them in the time that we have. Uh, First thing I want to say is this is really just unscripted. We have a ton of things to talk about, but I want to talk first about blind spots. What are some of the blind spots that you see people have when they get into a marriage? Just a general broad overview of more common blind spots that you see.
I think the main thing is just not knowing the person and his or her family well enough. So it's usually, less likely to become a successful marriage if the people have only been dating for a few months or they are rushed or pressured to get married because somebody has an accidental pregnancy. So those are usually, or if the people had a long distance relationship where they never really got to spend a lot of time together, for example, being in different countries and meeting each other online, that's usually not a great idea.
Right. How long do you think it takes to really vet somebody, get to know them? Just as a general rule.
Well, I mean, it also depends on how many hours you're actually with the person, but I would say just very rough ballpark, like you should be exclusively dating the person for at least a year or two before you decide to get married.
Right. I even think even longer than that.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is there any real reason to get married today? Let's say if you're past childbearing age
Mhm.
years, let's say you're in your mid to upper 40s. Is
Mhm.
marriage really, or is that a thing of the past?
Mm, I think there's still some societal pressure or just like a general feeling that you are more committed to somebody if you actually get married to them, that you're less likely to just bail out at the drop of the hat or when somebody has a medical crisis or if somebody's having some issues or financial problems. There's more dedication there. So even if somebody isn't religious or just very culturally ingrained to get married, I think there's still that kind of feeling that people are more committed to each other if they actually are legally married. Yeah, but of course, as we know, there are all sorts of, legal documents that you can do now. So even if you're not married to somebody, you can still execute a will or, own property with someone you're not married to. You can still, maybe even get health benefits for someone who is your live-in partner as opposed to being legally married. But I mean, I'm just kind of thinking, it probably just really affects tax issues, maybe, or social security benefits if you're married versus not married. But as I said, you can still execute a power of attorney, have somebody be your designated healthcare power of attorney, even if you're not legally married to your partner.
Right. Okay. I'm not a big fan of marriage. Okay. And it's not because I'm a
Mhm,
divorce lawyer, it's
mhm,
because it's so hard to get unmarried.
mhm,
And when people come in and see me because they're in a non functioning marriage, as you know, it can be a nightmare to get unmarried. It can be expensive. It can be confusing, complicated, lengthy. And I'm a big fan of looking at other ways that you can live your best life without bringing in state law, okay,
mhm.
to untangle the mess that people find themselves in. Um, I want to talk a second about some of the common things that I see that make marriages become non-functioning, and I want your point of view too. One big thing is spending habits. People don't realize that they're marrying a spendthrift or somebody that just is wildly in credit card debt. Do you see that in your practice too?
Sometimes, but again, it's something that if you have vetted your partner, boyfriend, or girlfriend, if you've vetted the person well before you guys decided to legally get married, then you probably saw some signs or you could have seen some signs. I have a friend who is an attorney, and she said that when they were just dating, she and her husband were talking about finances and he wanted to see her credit report. Which I was surprised because I've never heard of anybody asking someone for a credit report when you're just dating, but it makes sense. It shows how smart he is financially. And he, even though he's not an attorney, I mean, somehow he got the idea that perhaps I should check out this young lady's credit history before we take
Absolutely.
it further. But that's very good because that's a big red flag if the person's already been sued or ran away from debts and ran up tons of credit card, and it's just not a good idea in general to even get married to somebody like that. You see all those red flags already.
Yeah, exchanging credit reports. I did a video in that on my channel, and I think it's a great idea. Some of the skeletons that come out of the closet after you get married can be brutal, and people say either I missed it. A lot of people say I just wasn't thinking straight.
That's
I
right.
didn't vet. A lot of times, if guys are really thirsty, they haven't had great intimacy or great relationships, and they find someone who just they're so attracted to, they overlook a lot. Women too. I want to talk a second about a topic that I'm very, very familiar with, and I've had cases where there's someone with narcissistic personality disorder, where somebody gets love bombed, if you will, at the beginning of a relationship, and the person that they're love bombing is very empathetic, okay? And they get sucked in by all of this love and admiration. And then the person turns a switch on and becomes nasty and condescending. Have you heard of this? Have you seen this in your practice at all, where there's just not narcissistic traits, because that's everywhere. Everyone has a little bit of that, but they're just a horrible, self-centered, malignant personality kind of narcissist.
Yeah, I've definitely been involved in some cases where somebody was extremely narcissistic or just had no sense of remorse, even when they were openly cheating on the other spouse. And I don't know if it's narcissistic personality or just, just some sort of bad personality disorder or just being a jerk, being immoral. Yeah, you definitely do see that a lot. And that's what winds up, being a lousy marriage where the people are fighting in court and need to hire attorneys.
Right.
There's definitely a lot of personality disorders or people with dysfunction, and it's just a mess, but we deal with that all the time, right? We're almost
Yes, we
like
do.
overpaid therapists.
Yes, we do. Hey, I see a lot of questions are coming in, so I just wanted to make a quick point here. We're not giving legal advice. This is
disclaimer.
Yeah, this is just for information only. The goal of these interviews is really just to open up some of these issues that happen. And I think as a divorce attorney who has access to reach out to other divorce attorneys, I wanted to let you know that these issues are very widespread. I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm licensed in PA and New Jersey. Judy's in North Carolina. And she's going to, you're seeing it through the lens of two experienced divorce lawyers, which is rare. And I think it could be valuable, but it's not legal advice. We're not your lawyers. And the only person you can get legal advice from is from your own attorney in your jurisdiction with whom you have an attorney-client relationship. Now, just because you're watching this and asking questions, that doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. So, Judy, anything you want to add to that disclaimer?
Sure. This is for entertainment purposes only. And plus, as Jonathan and I discussed beforehand, the law can be totally different in different states too. So always take that caveat. Don't believe everything you see on the internet or YouTube or whatever. And, we don't want to be liable and have somebody come after us with a bar grievance later on, please.
Right. One thing that I get, and I've been on other people's channels, and have over 200 videos on my channel. Most of my videos are very short because I want to make them pithy. I want to make them to the point. Some content creators can talk a lot longer. I just wanted to hammer home certain points. One point that I want to make now that you just alluded to is the laws vary widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Now, just between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the laws vary widely. I want to talk briefly about prenuptial agreements because that's a big part of my practice. And talk, if you will, Judy, for a second about how you approach prenups. And I'd like to talk about it then after you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, normally I would tell the client what the laws would be in North Carolina if they did not have a prenup, and how a prenup can potentially change that legal relationship, or what happens if the couple later decides they're going to divorce. So you also expect your client, as well as the other person, to give a full and honest disclosure about their financial assets, so that there isn't much of a chance that later on somebody can say, well, you totally lied to me. I didn't realize you were worth $50 million or whatever. It's very important to have some disclosures.
Right. I agree. When someone comes in for a prenup consult with me, I explain it as that everybody has a prenup. Okay, it's either the law, and this is a Pennsylvania divorce code that I'm holding up.
Mhm.
This is your like default prenup. If you don't get a prenup, if you're smart enough to get a prenup, and this is a prenup that I drafted. This is your prenup with a smiley face. This one's about 50 or 60 pages.
Mhm.
So it's either what you want to have happen or what the state wants to have happen. So the choice is yours. You're going to either go through the state laws or your own. And I think that everybody should consider, who's getting married or considering it, should at least go through a prenup consult. And like you, I explain to anyone that comes in for a prenup consult, this is what the state law is. This is how the assets are identified and valued and distributed. So if you don't get your own prenup done that's properly drafted and properly executed, you're going to end up at the mercy of state law. And usually, then we'll do a deeper dive into other things. Before I go on prenups through my lens, anything else that you want to discuss regarding prenups?
Mhm. Well, I think it's always a good idea to have a prenup done if it's not your first marriage, or even if it is your first marriage. If you have assets or the potential to have a lot of assets, inheritance, anything that you want to protect, because you always, unfortunately, this is what the attorney is there to do, is to think about the worst case scenario. How are you going to be protected? We know that you're in love and you're planning the wedding, or your soon-to-be wife is planning the wedding. Everybody's happy, but we've seen it all go south after a few years or 20 years down the road. So how would you feel if you had to give 50% of all your 401k to somebody that you can't stand, or you feel that squandered away all your assets or cheated on you?
Right, exactly. We're both in what's known as equitable distribution states. So you could end up giving more than 50% of the marital assets to the other side based on a number of factors, but we'll get to that in a minute. I would also advise anybody who's considering getting married to get a prenup that's properly drafted even before the wedding invitations are printed, well before any planned wedding. Why? I haven't done one prenup where it doesn't come back to me with changes. And you don't want to wait until a month before the planned wedding to call an attorney and say, I need a prenup. You want it done months in advance, or as far in advance as possible. You don't want anyone under duress. You don't want anyone to say, I was rushed. I put down deposits for everything, and I felt like I had to sign it. A lot of times people come in from out of town, they make plans for your wedding, and you didn't want to disappoint them. So months in advance, you're going to put yourself in a much stronger position if the prenup is ever challenged based on duress. So the other thing is, I've set aside prenups, and oftentimes I see people come in with a prenup that they drafted themselves or bought off the internet, and it's a piece of garbage. I've had cases where the other side will have a prenup after the divorce file is plain. I'll be presented with a prenup, and I'll call opposing counsel and say, are you really going to waste time litigating this? Because it's so defective that it'll never hold up. Then they'll have to go back and explain to their client, it's not worth thousands of dollars to try to have this upheld. He's right. So penny wise, pound foolish. If you think you're going to copy a prenup from the internet or try to get one for free from someone that had one from another jurisdiction, they're all like custom made documents. No two cases are exactly alike. And it's better not to get married than to have a prenup that's defective and you think you're protected, because it's going to get set aside. And we don't want that to happen. We want you to have a prenup that works. So anything else on prenups before we keep going here?
No, but you do bring to mind, I haven't seen this with poorly drafted prenups, but definitely with poorly drafted do-it-yourself separation agreements. I've seen that so many times when people, show me some piece of garbage that they typed up themselves, piecing together something they found on Google or one of those, cheapy sites like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer or whatever. It always has like weird language that nobody would ever put in there if you're a North Carolina licensed attorney. And plenty of times the language is too vague or poorly worded by the person themselves. And once again, it's not going to be something that can be enforced by a court.
Right. It's blatantly obvious to me that when a prenup comes in and it's purchased off the internet or it's drafted without an attorney, an experienced attorney drafting it, it's just not worth litigating. You're kidding yourself. So while we're on the subject of prenups, just another quick point. Prenuptial agreement law varies widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Places like Pennsylvania, and I'm making this video with Judy in 2022, the year 2022, it's really viewed as a contract. In other jurisdictions, it has to be fair at the outset, and it cannot be unconscionable at divorce. So, and even other jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, a judge can redline certain things and change the prenup. Pennsylvania doesn't allow that. Judy, do you want to say a little bit about how North Carolina handles prenups and how to best protect your clients?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, normally in any prenup, it would also say that the choice of law would be in North Carolina. So even if the parties move to another state, then, if by any chance a litigation is brought in a different state, the judge would supposedly still apply North Carolina law. So I actually haven't been involved in any situations where we had to invalidate a prenup, because I think prenups are still pretty rare. I had a live stream on my channel, Asian American Legal Focus, with an attorney, Steve Epstein, who also said that, yeah, that's very rare that I have people coming in who have prenups.
Right.
Yeah, but in North Carolina in general, they would be enforceable, especially if you have a real attorney representing both sides. It's all like, formally drafted, signed, and notarized by both parties.
Right. I get a lot of comments on my videos where people from other jurisdictions say, my brother had a prenup and it got set aside. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on. I'm here to tell you that it depends upon what jurisdiction you're in and how the prenup was drafted. You have to really be careful. You have to be meticulous in the drafting, in the execution, how everything's done, because you're going to get tripped up. It's not a do-it-yourself kind of document. Matthew R., thank you for the comment. Is there any way to live together but not be considered common law or cohabitation, tenancy in common, ? Okay. Do you want to take that question?
Sure. It depends on the state, because in North Carolina, even if you're just living together and you tell everybody that's my wife or that's my husband or whatever, there is no common law marriage in North Carolina. In North Carolina, you're not married if you don't have an actual legal, marriage certificate. So,
Right.
yeah. And then cohabitation is a totally different term, which has to do with, people living with a romantic partner. It's usually more relevant when someone's trying to get out of paying alimony, if their agreement said that cohabitation would always also cut off the person's right to getting alimony.
Right, exactly. Pennsylvania, no more common law marriage either, I think after 1995. But there are jurisdictions, if you're in one of the Canadian provinces, I'm not sure, don't quote me, but I think in British Columbia, you live with somebody for 2 years and you're considered common law married. If you have a child with that person in British Columbia and you live for 1 year together, I believe they consider you common law married.
Oh,
Wow. That's
yeah.
unbelievable to
Interesting.
me.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that is weird. But, I can see why, for public policy reasons, they want to make sure that the kid has parents that are both going to be supporting each other in addition to the kid, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew, these two saving people's assets one video at a time. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
part of the goal of these collaborations with other attorneys. we're not afraid to talk about the tough issues. We're not indoctrinated by the Hallmark Channel videos and movies and Disney and, you know, I don't know, the rom-coms that Matthew McConaughey seems to star in all the time. Shout out to him because I think he's a good actor and a great guy. But, you know, this kind of information was not really widely available before technology like this allows it to be. So this is just like a cautionary tale video. We're going to give you some insight into the things that we see because we're in the mouth of the dragon in that courtroom. We are in those mediations and arbitrations, and it is just worse than you can imagine sometimes. So thank you for the comment. Here's another one. I want to get married in Mexico or Taiwan. I want to make sure that my assets, particularly real estate in the U.S., are protected from future litigation. Well, that's a great question. A lot of people ask that. I could tell you that you need to see an attorney in your jurisdiction because it's very fact specific and it's a complicated answer. Just because you get married outside of the country, there's a lot of other questions that somebody's going to want to ask you, such as where will you be domiciled and what is it that you're trying to protect? You can't just get married somewhere out of the country and then move back into the U.S. and expect the country where you got married, their laws may not apply to you. So, and here, a prenup will come in handy too, but it really comes down to where are you going to be domiciled? Where are you going to live? Those are the laws that you're going to want to know. Judy, any comments on that comment?
Oh yeah. It doesn't really matter where you get married, but you know, it sounds like you would probably need to get a prenup to protect whatever real estate assets you have in the United States.
Yeah. Get local counsel involved, and that's really it's worth every penny to book a consult with someone who's licensed in your jurisdiction and experienced, and they'll give you the roadmap on how to protect yourself to the greatest extent possible. I got another comment here. Matthew R. Yes, I am in Toronto. Common law can go into effect after 6 months. All right. First of all, the Canadian provinces, when I just do an overview, it is just incredible. I can't imagine why somebody would cohabitate in Canada. But I don't know if it's 6 months or a year. I know there was a seminal case out of the Toronto area for alimony where the people never really cohabitated, but they just kind of dated. She slept over at his house. He was a multimillionaire. This was a recent case. And she filed for alimony and got it, but they were never married.
Geez.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right at all. This goes to show how different laws can be in different countries or
unbelievable. But thank you, Matthew, for chiming in. Toronto, Ontario, British Columbia, some of those provinces. And some of the states in the U.S. are tough too. So know the law. How do you know the law? Contact a family law attorney in your jurisdiction. They'll help you navigate. And again, worth every penny. Cape 42, I remember that case. He got railroaded. The site escapes me, but it's really crazy. All right, I want to talk about a section now called Don't Let That Be You, okay? Some of the things that I see as a divorce lawyer, I want Judy to talk also, that you just wish you could put this person in a time machine and send them back for however long they need to be sent back so they don't make a mistake. What are some of the things that you see that you shake your head and say, oh my God, I wish that I could just send this person back?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the serious, sad situations are cases where there's physical violence and drug and alcohol abuse. And the vast majority of the time, the person does say that they already saw signs of it before they even got married and had children with the person. But they, like if someone's in and out of rehab, boy, big red flag. Someone's already getting so drunk to the point where you saw them falling down the stairs and peeing in his pants, or, the whole family drinks, all his friends drink and do drugs. Boy, why would you want to get married to this type of person or procreate with this type of person? So you're
Right.
just leading yourself to a life of misery, especially if you have children with someone with that kind of problem with drug, alcohol, or, violent temper type of issues.
Absolutely. I want to bring up a point. I've brought it up a couple times. It is the winning problem for the last 2 years. The most difficult thing I've seen in my practice, and I think in many other divorce and family law attorneys' practice, it's having a child or multiple children and getting with, especially with someone who you don't plan on having a relationship or a marriage with, and getting tripped up by the child support system. So if there's any one takeaway, I would ask young people, especially young guys, protect yourself to the greatest extent possible of not having a child with someone unless you really plan on co-parenting with them. The child support system can be brutal. I've seen guys who, for no fault of their own, can't keep up with the payments, and they end up in a position where they could be incarcerated, which doesn't help them make the payments after they're incarcerated anyway. But the way the system is set up, it's really stacked against them. Even if they're trying their best, it's like merciless, and they can't get out of this horrible quicksand of child support debt. It's just life ruining. And Judy, have you seen that? Have you seen anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I've also early on in my solo career, I was also the child support enforcement defense attorney of the day. It was like a court appointed thing where I could make a little bit of extra money by representing usually the deadbeat dads in child support court. So I've seen and heard all these sad stories. It's just really sad. I don't feel that sorry for them though, because it's usually the mom or the mother's mother that winds up having to foot the bill for these kids, where the dad won't pay child support or is chronically underemployed or getting into, committing crimes in and out of jail. So, yeah, I mean, just gosh, like maybe some of these guys should really be having vasectomies or something. I mean, I did feel like, all these people here need to get some counseling about birth control and stuff. What are they doing? Having all these kids with screwed up people, and, it goes both ways.
Right. And
And
if
then it
you're
ruins them for life financially.
right, even high asset guys, even like pro athletes make several $1,000,000. Some of them make over 10 or $15 million a year, have made the mistake of meeting someone in the hotel bar and impregnating them. And then they end up paying them child support in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes per month, because child support is largely based on a formula. It doesn't really look at the reasonable needs of the child. It looks at how much you make, how much, or your earning capacity, how much they make, and then they have a formula for that. So if you make $15 million a year, you could find yourself paying $300,000 a month or more if you're a pro athlete or you're a high earner, you're CEO. You really need to understand this. So I've made videos about this, and I just want to throw it back over to Judy for her point of view on how important it is to just protect yourself in that area.
Oh, sure. Sure. I mean, this brings to mind, I'm going to say this because this is not a client attorney matter, but I used to be friends with somebody, and she hooked up with a very wealthy man. And you can guess what happened. She was actually taking ovulation detector tests on purpose so that she could accidentally get pregnant with him. And lo and behold, that's what happened. But, it had a happy ending because they got married. But, some of our mutual friends just totally lost respect for this person that we used to all be friends with. But I guess she felt old, like she was getting older. She had no husband. She was divorced already. And lo and behold, here comes some nice, attracted, very wealthy man that, is interested in her. So she had accidentally or on purpose had a baby to hook this man in. So it does happen. It sounds like something you just read about in the National Enquirer or whatever, but it doesn't just happen to celebrities.
Yeah, I see that happen all the time. And just to add to that, occasionally I'll represent someone in a divorce, middle-aged guy, really hitting his stride, very good looking. And I'll give him a lecture about, man, now you're free, but you better be careful because you got a target on your back. So if you're watching this and you haven't been introduced to the divorce machine, or if you have and you've escaped it, be careful out there, really careful, because there's a lot of people who do what Judy just said. They'll just time the ovulation. You can't imagine. I've heard stories
poke a hole in the condom.
Hole in the condom, or if you're some of the pro athletes take the condom with them, so they can't try to take a turkey baster. I know it sounds far-fetched, but it happens a lot.
It's funny, but yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, Capo42 writes, look at the most recent Abbott and Preach video. Horrendous what these women do to men. I love Abbott and Preach. I love their commentary and their content. And so I will take a look at that. And I would suggest anyone else who's not familiar with who they are to take a look at them too. They're really smart guys, and they have some great videos. So
yeah, I've never heard of them, but I'll go check it out this weekend.
Yeah, terrific, smart guys. You won't be sorry. Okay, looks at Nick Cannon, Capo. Yeah, I mean, it's
a mess.
Yeah, they don't care if male, female, you're a superstar. If you out earn somebody, make millions of dollars, and you have children together, it's going to happen. All right, I want to move on for a second. Why family court is the last place you want to be. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive. You got two divorce lawyers here talking about this, and we're telling you that go live your best life, all right? Divorce court, family court's the last place you want to be. Most family court attorneys, the smart ones, the good ones, they'll tell you the same thing. Why? Because if no one ever got married again and there were no more divorces, most of the ones I know are smart enough to be able to pivot to another area of the law. I've got an MBA. I could go start another business. We're not in this like a lot of people think we are. It's not all about the money. One of the purposes of this video and the videos on my channel is to help you level up and live your best life, not get sucked into the vortex of family court. Some of these cases never end. If you have a vindictive spouse that you just want to extricate yourself from, they're always going to find a reason to appeal or cause more problems. If there's children involved, it might not end until they emancipate or beyond. So the goal is to keep you out to begin with. All right. So first point on why we want to keep you out of family court. Frankly, much of it is out of your control. And Judy, do you want to talk about that point for a second?
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Yes, there's definitely been plenty of times when I went to court with a client and we didn't get what we wanted. So that's why all my legal representation agreements say no guarantees. The attorney cannot guarantee any particular outcome to the case, as such is out of the control of the attorney. So yeah, even things where I thought that, boy, we should be able to win this, then you end up being slapped by the judge, or the judge gives you like a totally different custody schedule that makes the client very upset, or that you think that goes against common sense. But then what are you going to do? Family court judges have wide discretion in what they order. So a lot of times things just aren't even worth appealing. And meanwhile, the client has to pay by the hour, because most family law attorneys, at least where I am, we charge by the hour. It's very risky to do flat fee because you don't know how long some matter is really going to take or how high maintenance the person could be. So that's usually what the biggest fear is that you don't know what the judge is going to do. The judge might be having a bad day, or you might remind the judge of somebody they hated, or make them have PTSD about something bad, and so they don't like you. I mean, I've had judges like almost yell at my client because they just found my client so despicable or annoying. And so, I mean, who really wants to be in that kind of situation where somebody listens to you for maybe 1 to 2 hours and then makes a life-changing decision about you and your kids, or you
Right.
and your money?
Yeah. I know the judges that I've been in before pull their hair out to try to get it right, but they're human too. And, in child custody cases, and we'll go into that maybe in another video, no one knows your kid better than you do. So I tell clients usually, one question I always ask, is there any way that the marriage can be saved? Because if it can, you should at least try to save it. Most really good divorce lawyers I know ask the same question. But two, a lot of this is out of your control. You're putting life decisions in the hands of a stranger in a black robe, which is really what a judge is. They don't know you. They don't know your circumstances. So I always tell clients too, if possible, the more that you could agree on the other side and then bring in your agreement to me, I'll memorialize it in a marital settlement agreement so it becomes enforceable. So if the other side is somewhat agreeable, great. Let's see what we could flesh out and agree on. And whatever we can't agree on, we can try to mediate or go to arbitration and then use litigation as the last step if we just can't come to a reasonable agreement. Would you say that's a good strategy too for your practice, Judy?
Sure. Yes. As someone who is a mediator also, and I've also volunteered as a mediator for domestic violence custody cases too. And mediation is just such a great thing because, this is your last chance to try to have at least some control over the outcome of your case. So it's also great to keep people out of the court system because the judges here, at least where I am, they're totally overwhelmed. They're like totally booked up for, say, the next 4 months. And it's just stressful. That's why I would never want to be a family court judge, because it's just nonstop conflict here, conflict there. You have to like quickly shift gears and learn all the intricacies of every single family's case. And it happens many times throughout every single workday. So I don't know how they can handle that, but I'm all for people trying to settle things using alternative dispute resolution processes.
Right. I just want to add to that. Anytime I've been involved in a case with another experienced lawyer on the other side, and we'll go in with a settlement agreement to the judge on any matter, they're delighted. They love it. They love when we're able to work stuff out. So here's another reason why you don't want to get tripped up in this. If one litigant decides that they don't want to settle and they want their day in court because you ran away with the secretary or you cheated on me or you name it, it could drag on for months or even years. So, a prenup could help clean up a lot of the economic issues. They don't usually deal with child support and child custody, but all the economics are going to be cleaned up with a prenup, which is another reason to get a prenup, because it stops the other person from running wild forever on the economic issues. Some people fight over an ice cream scoop or a carpeting or whatever. You can't imagine the stuff that people fight over while the clock is ticking for attorney fees. So, prenup would stop that. But basically, in most jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, the lawyers deal with the strategy, but the ultimate decision whether or not to settle is with the client. And if you get a bitter, angry client that can't see the forest from the trees, they'll drain your life savings. And they don't care because they feel they've been wrong. Have you seen that at all? Judy?
Where some people just want to, do that kind of scorched earth litigation.
Right.
Yeah, well, definitely I've run into a few attorneys during my career that I felt were not being really ethical by trying to do everything they could to run up the other person's attorney's fees. And in a way, it isn't fair. Well, I don't know if I should say it isn't fair, but at least in North Carolina, when you have claims for child support, child custody, or post-separation support or alimony, it is possible for the poorer spouse to get the judge to order attorney's fees, where the richer spouse then has to pay back or reimburse for all the attorney's fees or even part of the attorney's fees. So, that kind of puts pressure on the richer person to kind of cave in and say, okay, let's settle it, because I don't want to have to pay $30,000 of attorney's fees to your attorney. So, so that's another thing people do have to be aware of. And in many states, there are attorney's fees provision where you could be liable for your spouse's attorney's fees.
Right. Absolutely true in Pennsylvania too. You can put in your original complaint account for attorney's fees, costs, and expenses. So, but if you have a valid prenup, a lot of that can be already dealt with ahead of time. Prenup's like an insurance policy. So it just makes total sense considering about half of first marriages end in divorce. And if it's a second or subsequent marriage, it's closer to like 60, 70%. And some people keep getting married over and over. So part of the message from me today is don't do that anymore. All right. You could still have great intimacy, great relationships, but you don't need to bring state law in to get you untangled. This is a great comment because it's one of the points I had here. Jonathan, we appreciate what you're doing here for the community. You're very welcome. I'm getting pressure to marry from my parents every time I talk to them. So I want to talk about under the heading of don't let this be you. You should never, ever get married because of someone else's narrative, customs, or desires. And depending upon your culture or what your parents did or what your friends are doing, do not let that kind of pressure permeate your decision and influence you to get married. You're going to end up in my office or in Judy's office or in another divorce lawyer's office. There's no reason for that. It should not be part of why you're getting married. Judy, give us some insight from your point of view.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you definitely need to just maybe stop listening to your parents or just kind of tell them, look, I will get married when I feel that it's ready for myself. I mean, this is going to be your marriage, not your parents' marriage. I mean, unless they plan on, moving in with you and running your life, in which case, I don't think that helps most marriages either. Yeah. So don't feel like there's any timetable. If it's the right person, then you will know. Because, just based on what I've seen in my own situation and my friends and my relative situations, I feel like things almost have to be 100% perfect or darn near perfect when you're dating in order for your marriage to be successful. Because usually marriages aren't as great years down the road after you get married. I don't know if Jonathan, if you want to step in and say anything, but if things aren't hunky-dory at the time that you're engaged and getting married, then it's only going to get worse when you're really living with the person and having to deal with their family problems and having your finances intertwined and having to do a lot of difficult, stressful things together, like buying a house, juggling your money, having children possibly. Yeah, these things cause stresses on a marriage. So if you're already having to go to therapy when you're just dating, I mean, which I've heard from some friendly acquaintances, I'm like, that's weird. If you're already having to see a therapist over your dating relationship, that's not a good thing. I mean, and in that one person's situation that I'm thinking of, they did end up getting divorced after having a young child. So, and she's an attorney, or she was an attorney. So yeah. I mean, if things aren't really that great and you're not 100% happy, then why get married? Nobody needs to get married in this day and age.
Yeah, you don't want to, a lot of times people get pressure from their parents because their parents want to become grandparents. And that is just not a good reason to get married. It's probably a bad reason. Uh, but depending upon culture and how you feel about that, you're going to end up in a divorce lawyer's office if you're not careful. And we don't want that. Okay. We want you to live your best life. I got a question here from Ted. He said, Nick Cannon. Let's see here.
Oh, there's someone that asked how much divorce lawyers charge. So I'll just be honest here. I don't know how many people are really going to watch this video anyway, but my hourly rate is now $290 an hour, which is actually low compared to a lot of the other divorce attorneys in Wake County, because I'm in a county that's a little bit more affluent compared to the rest of North Carolina. And when my sister was getting divorced around the DC area, this was years ago. Back then, there were attorneys charging $500 an hour, and saying that there has to always be at minimum $10,000 in the retainer in the trust account. Otherwise, the attorney is going to withdraw. So it really depends on the market wherever you are. And I know some people are going to say, well, you guys are all a bunch of greedy, money-sucking pigs, and why do you charge so much and stuff? Well, I could go off on that, but I don't know if anybody really wants to hear about the economics of being a divorce lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, it varies based on experience and metropolitan area.
Yeah, the market rate.
Yeah. We are two experienced divorce attorneys who are telling you what to look out for. So how anybody could say that all divorce attorneys are alike, and no, it's not. This is like a public service, for lack of a better term. And you could either choose to listen or not. You could roll the dice and see what happens. Question from the perspective of being a female attorney: do a lot of guys shy away from commitment due to the woman's high income potential, or simply being a lawyer? That's your question, Judy. It looks like.
No. Well, first of all, I don't think most lawyers have high income potential. It's all relative. I mean, I make more than someone that works at McDonald's, although I do have an attorney friend who quit being a lawyer so he could work for McDonald's because he hated being a lawyer so much. Yeah, no, I don't see that at all. And actually, I did want to mention this earlier, but I've been seeing more and more cases where it's the woman that makes more than the man.
Right.
And so usually those women are livid when they might have to potentially pay post-separation support or alimony to their husbands. They always feel like they did more of the work in the marriage, or that the man might have sort of been, almost cheating on them, or just feel like they were the ones that had to spend more of the time taking care of the kids and stuff. So why should I give this like lazy jerk, half of my 401k and my retirement money? And why should I have to give him alimony? I can't believe it, but that's just the way the law is, at least in my state, that it doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you make a lot more than your spouse, and it's always been that way, and, all these other factors, obviously, but, now more women are at risk of having to pay the alimony.
Speaking of paying alimony, in your jurisdiction, can a prenup cover alimony? Can you eliminate alimony from having to pay it?
Yeah, not in my state. I mean, the attorneys on our listservs have gone back and forth about that, but in general, the belief is that no, you can't just flat out address. Let me think for prenup.
I mean, some jurisdictions you can eliminate alimony and spousal support.
Oh, actually, yes, you can, but for a post-nup, you can't.
Post-nup's different.
Yeah, because I think the reason behind that is that they want marriages to be intact, and they don't want people feeling threatened while they're still married and living together, to say that, well, you better sign this saying that you're not going to get any alimony if we separate,
Right.
Because then there's that pressure, the undue coercion on
That's
the
a
part
good
of the
point.
people.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some jurisdictions don't even recognize postnuptial agreements for that reason. You lose all the leverage in the world once you exchange vows regarding promises made. It's got to be done in a prenup. that's really where your leverage is. Because once you get married, trying to negotiate a postnup. Now, there are valid reasons for getting a postnup that is beyond the scope of this live stream, but you want to get it cleaned up before the wedding invitations go out. There's a good question. Does choosing a female attorney have advantages in court over a male attorney in 2022? Judy, you want to address that? I'd like to address it too.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. And in family court, we have male as well as female judges in family court. So I don't really see any gender bias in regards to the way attorneys are treated versus, how the judge is going to rule if it's male or female. So, yeah, and I found that, just to give a plug or shout out to my local judges, I feel like the judges do try their best to be very fair and professional. So it is very rare, even though there was that time there was a judge or a couple of judges that aren't family court judges anymore seem to be mad and annoyed at my clients.
Right.
But I don't think there's any advantage, but it really has to do with how you as a client feel, because some people feel like, they want to have some older lady as their attorney, and some other people feel like they want to have an older man to be their attorney. They feel more comfortable that way. But, you can't make any sweeping generalizations.
I would agree 100% with what you just said. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, whether your attorney's a man or a woman. A couple other things through my experience that don't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a solo practitioner or somebody that works for a 500 attorney law firm. It comes down to the specific attorney handling your case. It doesn't matter where the attorney went to law school or college. It matters how gritty they are and how much work and preparation they put into representing you. So experience counts some, but now I've never seen a judge that looks at the genders of the litigants or the lawyers as a factor. So I think it's a real misnomer. So a lot of guys that I have seen speak about this or think that family court is against guys, it's not necessarily the court. The laws are what they are, and the judges interpret the laws. But you don't know their backstory, or maybe they did things that they shouldn't have done that come out during trial. But, I'm proud to say I haven't seen that a judge of any gender is biased for any reason. They look at the facts. You got to have your case prepared properly. You have to prepare your case very, very well, as if it could go up on appeal. So you have to make a great record, and you have to have your evidence squared away and organized, and your witnesses have to be that kind of stuff is going to make or break your case. Not like there's not this huge bias. And a lot of states, Pennsylvania now has certain statutes where the courts have to be gender blind. In child custody cases, they used to have the tender years doctrine where little kids would always be living with the mom. That's gone as of, I think, 2011. So even the laws have changed and evolved, and they're continuing to change and evolve. My understanding is Ohio has a bill that's in their state house, HB 508, where physical custody of children will start at a default 50-50 between the two parents. And I hope it passes, and I hope other states follow suit. So I'm seeing an evolution of changes. It's slow, but it's not like years ago where the kids always went with mom, at least in Pennsylvania and other jurisdictions that I'm familiar with. What's it like in North Carolina?
Well, I mean, I pretty much agree with you. Yeah, same things that, I think that people do have this overall knowledge that you have to be professional, you have to be prepared, and it really doesn't matter whether you have a male or female attorney. The law is the law. So it's up to the judge to interpret that.
Right. All right, there's a comment. I'm not familiar with this case. Jonathan, Nick Cannon has 8 children with 5 different women. Judy, do you know anything about Nick Cannon?
Yeah, I do know about him, and didn't he have, like, he had sexual relations with 2 different women that both got pregnant within a month of each other, or maybe even a few days, who knows? It's crazy. And I mean, that's just pathetic. Like, I don't care that he or his baby mamas have enough money to pay for the kids, but you just got to think about the kids. They're not going to have the dad in their lives as much as someone that has an intact family where the parents are both at least living together all the time. It's just stupid and irresponsible, and that's me with my moral judgment on that situation. That's just sad. And that's
Yeah,
the way I felt when I was doing child support court defense for the deadbeat dads. It's like, why are these people having so many kids?
right. Nothing will screw up your life faster than having children out of wedlock, especially with multiple women. It's just insane. And the courts are merciless sometimes, and the collection process is merciless. They'll freeze your bank accounts, you'll get incarcerated. If you take nothing else away from this chat today, don't do it. Don't do it. There's plenty of ways to protect yourself. So be smart about that.
Yeah. Plus, think of the effect on the poor kids and the effect on society as a whole when you have all these, random kids out there that barely even knew their dad, or dad just shows up, maybe on the birthday and takes some pictures, and, dad might give them a gift. But, what does that mean for the way that the child is going to grow up and what kind of relationships they're going to have? It's like a whole domino effect.
Yeah, it's just brutal. And I can't understand it, but obviously it's a real problem. And through a divorce lawyer's lens, or two divorce lawyers' lenses, we see it, and you don't want to be part of that. If you could avoid it. We've gone almost an hour. I'm going to wrap up shortly. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before I just jump into a couple other quick things for the audience?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, the stuff I saw the questions in the chat box about Nolan and North Carolina. So good old Google is your friend. So that's very rare. I've never had to deal with getting somebody's marriage annulled, but it's usually if you turns out you guys were related, or somebody was underage at the time, or it was a bigamous marriage. So I've never seen that litigated before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to take a couple more of these questions. You have a few, you have a little
Yeah.
bit of extra
Yeah, I'm
time?
here.
Because
Sure.
we got some nice engagement here. Good question. David Valens, what would have to happen to make divorce courts more fair to men? What kind of processes would have to happen in order to change state law to make marriage and divorce laws more fair to both sexes? I'm going to just answer this preliminarily and say, if you don't like state law, state divorce law, start with a prenuptial agreement. All right. You're going to take these laws that maybe have been written decades ago. So prenup, equitable distribution, or if you're in a community property state, I think there's 11 states, including California, where it's like default 50-50. And you don't like the alimony laws, get a prenup and speak to local counsel. But there is a maybe well-deserved opinion out there that the divorce courts are unfair to men. Well, men step up and make it more fair by leveling the playing field by either what? Getting a prenup or don't get married. Wow. As a divorce lawyer telling you, don't get married. There's plenty of people that have children and even cohabitate with their significant other without getting married. Now, if you're in a common law state or a province or a country that recognizes common law, think about whether or not you want to deal with the laws in order to get divorced. Judy, I want you to chime in on that in terms of the laws being fair.
Well, I feel like in North Carolina, where I practice in Wake County, I feel like it is fair to men. I've been involved in a case pretty recently where the judge ordered the woman, the wife, to pay post-separation support to this deadbeat that didn't even want to work. how's that fair? But
Right.
anyway, there are tons more details there. But I've seen case after case where it's the woman that has to give a chunk of her 401k to the man, even if the man was already like chatting up women on the internet or on dating apps and stuff. I mean, the women in those cases felt really livid and pissed off about it. They didn't feel like it was fair towards them. And plus, we also have, I would say, half the judges here in family court are men now. So there goes any sort of bias. But I do feel like, the judges that we elect here are pretty fair. So, if you feel like the courts are not fair, then maybe try to figure out, well, how does the judicial system work in my state or my county? How can I support the campaigns? If you're in a place where people elect the judges, how could I support the campaigns of the judges that I do like?
Right. I just want to, there's a couple other good questions here. We're not going to talk about Title 4D in this video, but it's something that we could do a deep dive on that deals with the child support system. And it's an important topic that affects a lot of people. Can you talk about paternal fraud in North Carolina? What would it take to make DNA testing to the baby when it's born mandatory by state or federal law? I just want to talk about that for a second because it's a very important topic. I'm not going to talk about North Carolina law, but in Pennsylvania, before you agree that you are the father, you can request a paternity test. And I strongly recommend that you do that if there's 0.00001% chance that you're not the father. Why? Because once you acknowledge paternity, you're responsible for that child, even if the actual biological father and the mother come forward and say, we lied, he's not really the father. You're not going to get off the case. You'll be paying to raise that child, most likely. There are limited exceptions, but it's a rampant problem where a guy will be dating a woman who's dating multiple other guys, but he's a better provider. So they'll put his name on the birth certificate and he won't challenge it, or he won't demand a paternity test, or he'll just go along. And he gets hamstrung. Years later, he finds out she cheated on him and he's stuck. So the question, to directly answer it, what would it take to make DNA testing to the baby when it is born mandatory by state or federal law? Let's put the onus back on you if you're the father. You have a right, okay? It doesn't even have to be a law, but you have to know your rights and you have to demand. It's only a swabbing of the cheek, I think now. They don't even have to take your blood to get it to 99.99% accuracy. So if there's any doubt whatsoever, get a paternity test. Most jurisdictions that I'm familiar with do it for free because they kind of want to get it right too. They don't want to, but most guys are like, well, she says I'm the father. Don't do that. Judy, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, don't they sell these like easy DNA testing kits at Walmart now? Like you could just go to CVS or Walmart or wherever and buy one of those tests. And it is routinely done through child support enforcement court too, where the alleged baby daddy says, well, I want to make sure the kid is mine. And so, the judges routinely will order those kinds of paternity tests. Because one strange thing in the law that some people don't realize, at least in North Carolina, is that if the woman is married to a man when the child is born, then the husband is default the father of the child, even if everybody knows that mom was having an affair, and so this baby is really the boyfriend's kid. So I've had to do legitimation cases where the true father stepped up and wanted to legitimate his child and say that, well, even though Susie or whatever was married to Jim Bob here, I'm the true father and we all agree. So let's all sign off on affidavits and have me declared as the father of the child. So there are legal procedures to, correct these things.
Right. Okay. So here's another good comment. That being said, how many women have gone homeless, committed suicide, or were incarcerated due to family and divorce litigation? And in parentheses, he wrote crickets. And you know what? Kudos to you for bringing this up. Yep, a vast majority of the ones that get despondent are the guys. it's really more the guys who are the moneyed people, the people who are earning a lot more or get married without a prenup and then lose a fortune of everything they've worked for. And, child support, we're not going to get into it deeply in this video, but the payor is usually a person that has less physical custody of the child. And historically, the women have gotten a primary physical custody. So there hasn't been a lot of women, unless they're entertainers or they are heirs to big fortunes, who end up paying alimony and child support. So yeah, it's just the way society's set up. So if you're a guy and you're ambitious and you have big plans or you're successful, that's why we're making this video, because the laws can be brutal. And there's no dispute that a vast majority are guys. So you don't see women brain surgeons marrying a guy who works as a clerk somewhere, or they just don't. That's because if you saw that, you'd see more women have to be the payor. Judy, any comments on this good comment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like to mention that, we've had cases in North Carolina where the women got killed by the husband because of a pending divorce or fear of impending divorce, like the Brad Cooper case. It was actually my former boss who represented Brad Cooper in the criminal case, but he strangled his wife and left her body in this construction development near their neighborhood because he was afraid that she was going to take the kids and run off to Canada, where she was from. And then the Michelle Young case, she was killed by her husband who was cheating on her, and he was mad that she got pregnant with their second child. So there are these like really sad, horrible stories where somebody, and based on what I've read and seen, it's usually the wife that ends up being murdered by the husband because of, fear of a custody situation or divorce case.
Right. There's a comment here, and we're not going to shy away from anything in this program.
Chad and Tyrone.
Right. So, and then there was another comment that said they don't know who Chad and Tyrone are. Also, these are professionals giving legit advice. Again, it's not legal advice. We're just having a chat between two experienced divorce lawyers. Please have some courtesy and don't troll. He's not trolling, but I appreciate you coming to our defense. Please talk about Chad and Tyrone. So do you want to talk about this, or do you want me to give...
I don't really understand what that means. Is Chad like a slang term for some guy that just sleeps around, and Tyrone is like an African-American male stereotype?
I don't know if it's an African-American male stereotype or not. But my understanding is that women in many demographics will date a beta provider, a guy who makes money and takes her out on dates and acquiesces to all of her demands. And then she goes and sleeps with Chad and Tyrone. I did a video of this on my channel where Kaylee comes over after a date. And long story short, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Chad and Tyrone are the ones that have all of the intimacy, and the beta providers are the ones that give the woman money or take her on experiences. And it seems to me like, based on what we've been talking about, it seems like they think that Chad and Tyrone gets off scot-free, that sometimes Chad and Tyrone will impregnate a woman, but the beta provider will end up as the father. That seems to be the line of questioning, as far as I understand it. Just from my point of view, it exists. There's no denying it. If you're willing to be someone's beta provider and get betatized, that's on you. All right. So anything you want to add before we keep going?
Yeah, thanks for telling me that my voice can drive someone crazy. So yeah, but luckily I do have a very good relationship with my ex-husband. So my voice did not drive him crazy. And I
Yeah.
would like to see a picture of you and hear how sonorous your voice is too, sir.
Okay. All right. You have a few more minutes because we're getting some good questions, and I think we're getting to the bottom of some things. I want you to answer this one, if you would. What are the major reasons why you have seen why people are getting divorced in your experience? Is it social media addiction, infidelity, fights about money? Judy, you got the floor.
Well, I think it's because part of it is just that it's become socially more acceptable for people to be divorced, because in my parents' generation, they were immigrants from Taiwan. And the same thing with a lot of immigrants from other countries. It's considered very taboo or just really bad to be divorced, and people just stuck together back in those days, even though they were miserable, even though the husband might have been cheating or whatever, because the woman had no job and no financial resources of her own. So things have totally changed in another generation where, divorce is pretty common now. And you're not looked down upon because you're divorced. And most people have their own jobs and their own money, and not one person is totally dependent on the other spouse. So I think that's why more people are getting divorced, because they see that, like they say, they don't want to be like their parents' generation where somebody was miserable but stuck in the relationship. So, and then sure, I think social media also, where, this is what drives me crazy, well, in part about Facebook, is that you see all these people constantly posting lovey-dovey pictures of themselves with their boyfriend or their spouse and cooing over them. And you're like, well, why don't you just walk over across the room and go say that directly to your spouse or your boyfriend? There's no need for you to be plastering all this stuff and pictures of flowers that someone sent you just to keep humble bragging about yourself. And, in my experience, some of the people who did post those types of pictures, it turns out they were having marital problems, and then they wound up divorced. So don't just trust everything you see on social media. But I think that does also affect people's expectations, feeling like they're not in such a great relationship because all these people they're seeing on Instagram or Facebook or whatever are crowing about their wonderful 100% wonderful relationships. So that could make more people feel less secure in their own relationships too. And of course, infidelity and money has always been a driving force in divorce for, since people got divorced.
Right. I'm just going to add to that. Social media has created what I think we call lifestyle creep. If somebody sees their friends on social media with a big home or a lot of trappings, new car, they'll put pressure on the spouse to bring in more money, and then eventually it becomes untenable for the other person. And people change. It's just a fact of life where the person that you married, we say the person you married is not the one who you divorced. And that's universally true, at least in my experiences. So if you're not careful and you just lose sight of what's really important, you could find yourself in a situation where someone's constantly pressuring you to be something you're not. And then it gets spun out of control. You'll work yourself into a position where they're just never happy because there's always the next thing to chase. So I see that a lot. I just want to ask Judy a quick question about in her practice. I see a lot of people who have not slept together for years before somebody files for divorce. I'm talking 5 years, 6 years. Is that something that's prevalent in your divorce practice too? Through your
Yeah.
own?
Yeah. I was kind of taken aback the first time a male divorce client just told me that he and his wife, or he had not had sex in 7 years. I'm like, okay, thank you for telling me that, sir. But it is relevant. Like I said, we're sometimes like overpaid therapists here, where we hear the most intimate details about people's relationships and their insecurities and problems and all the skeletons in their closet and everything. So sure, that's just something that you have to sort of listen to and kind of be understanding that the people that come into our offices are often very emotionally broken people that are at the worst times in their lives. or suffering through depression. And then sometimes you do have to like encourage people to see a real professional, because I'm not a trained therapist. I only took one psychology class years ago in college. So sometimes I'm not really equipped to, be that sounding board for someone that really just wants to vent and vent and vent, but they don't really want a legal solution.
Right. I'll tell clients oftentimes, look, you're paying me too much to be your therapist. You do need therapy. You should get therapy. It'll help the whole process. You don't want to use your lawyer as a therapist. That's a bad waste of resources. So another thing, just overarching generalization here, you don't want to try to plead your case to a court and just dig the other person, because a lot of that stuff is extraneous. You want to know what the law is, and based on the facts, how your case is going to come out. The fact that the other person did this or that, with limited exception, has very little to do with how the case is going to turn out. So, all right. Anything else you want to add? I'm going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. We got some great questions, and I think we let people here. Somebody wrote excellent insight from Judy right here. Thank you for that comment. I agree.
Thanks for being here and making all these great comments, and people who ask very insightful questions. Yeah.
There's a lot more we could talk about, and we'll do another one. I'd love to have you back. Sure. Anything else you want to go into before I just throw out there what kinds of things we want to talk about? Leave a comment, because you'll still be able to comment after this uploads. It won't be live.
That's fine. Well, can I sell my channel?
Absolutely. Tell us where to find you. Tell us where. Go ahead, but you have the floor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my YouTube channel is called Asian American Legal Focus. I do mostly have legal videos there, but I have had interviews with, sort of notable Asian Americans or Asian American themes. And I'm also a big figure skating fan. So I had some skating things there, but by and large, I'm trying to focus on legal themes, things for people who are interested in going to law school or considering it versus, practicing attorneys, and more practical tips for people who are just interested in legal subjects. So, and my law firm is called Wake Law Office, and the website is wakelawoffice.com, but I'm only licensed in North Carolina, practicing in the Triangle area.
Okay, I'll put a link below in the show notes to all of Judy's information. Thank you, Judy. Yeah. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, sorry we don't have time to address all these other topics that I've seen showing up on the stream, but maybe that can be a topic for a future show. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. We have a list of things that we knew we weren't going to get to today: child custody, a deeper dive into mediation, arbitration, and collaborative divorce, child support topics, child relocation topics, school choice and divorce topics, domestic violence allegations, and how to best defend them and protect yourself. That's a big topic that you're going to want two experienced divorce lawyers to talk about: domestic violence, because that system too it can have its problems. And I think we can maybe add some value and insight. So thanks again for being with me, Judy.
Sure. I'll hang on for a bit so we can still chat after you turn off the live stream. Thanks everybody for joining in.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Have a great day.